wait, what cohort are we? I always forget.
We are cohort 10.
We are cohort 10. Yes. Okay. Now, yeah. Now we can write start, or I guess you already started. Okay. So this is the 10th cohort for the book club r4ds10. We are going to present the chapter 28, which is the introduction for Quarto documents. My name is Gabby, and here we go. So Quarto essentially started about like a couple of years ago, right, John? It's relatively new.
Yes, I think it's 2 years.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that it took off like right away, and people were embracing it very, very fast. And I think one of the reasons, this is all my opinion, right? But one of the reasons why it's because the documentation is really, really good. So I think this book chapter does a very good job at like walking you through the very basics, but the documentation, the website is very, very good. So I think that made it super user-friendly so that people could embrace it and start using it very, very early on. So I only put one learning objective here, which is understand the basic components of a Quarto document. We are going to go through a lot of things here. But essentially, if you already know Markdown and R Markdown, then the jump to Quarto is not going to be that extreme. It's just a little step more that you want to do. And if you're new and you haven't done R Markdown ever, then what better way than to start with Quarto? Forget about R Markdown. Just jump into Quarto. But anyway, let's begin. So Quarto is essentially a command line interface tool. It's not an R package. So that means that when you don't need to load anything because RStudio is going to do it for you. Quarto unifies the functionality of many packages from R Markdown, but they just put all of them into a single consistent system. And this is super interesting because based on all the years that we've been using Bookdown, R Markdown, and Distill, and all of those, I feel like the team that developed Quarto, they took all of that knowledge, all of those packages, and now it's just one system. So that's good, because then you don't have to learn all these other things separately, right? Like it's more user friendly. I keep saying that. So Quarto is it's also one of the key elements or functionalities that it has is that it has native support for multiple programming languages like Python and Julia, in addition to R. So you can essentially mix and match code from R, but insert also Julia. And then I've heard also Mermaid or something like that. And then Python, a little bit of Python here and there. So that is, I think like that versatility is also making Quarto a very powerful tool. Like I said, and I put here the link, but the documentation, the website is amazing. So anything that you need to know, it's going to be there. And essentially, if you Google anything regarding Quarto, the first thing that's going to pop up on Google is going to be the Quarto website. Because, so go there if you have any questions or additional things, then obviously go to the Slack, the DSLC Slack if you need any answers for any questions that you have, or just, Google it. But anyway, so these are the Quarto, these are the things, the key things about Quarto documents is that you are guaranteeing reproducibility, because everything that you have in your document, you can just rerun it and give it to someone else so they can rerun it and then produce the same document that you have with the same results. It supports a dozen of output formats, not just PDFs or HTMLs. It also can produce a Word file, presentations, and so much more. Now with Quarto dashboards, that's another output that you can also use here. Anyway, the three main uses for a Quarto document are communication. Like I said, when you're focusing on the information that you want to extract from all those results, not necessarily the code. So you give that to someone else. You have your PDF with all your conclusions and a pretty graph. If you want to collaborate with other scientists, including future you, then you may be interested in having those conclusions, but also your code. So then, that's what you have. So that's like, for example, for packages documentations, that's like the best way to do them too, because then you have not just text and explanations, but also the code embedded here. And that shouldn't have a W, that should be the environment in which to do data science. So it becomes an environment in which you are doing data science, right? You're producing results here. So let's go through the basics here. The Quarto files will have the QMD extension instead of the RMD that the R Markdown documents have, or the MD. They contain 3 types of content. First, we start with a YAML that is going to be surrounded by 3 dashes, and that is going to contain the metadata of your document, essentially. And so that's at the top of the document. Then you're going to have the code, anything that is code inside your document. It needs to be in a chunk that is going to be surrounded by 3 backticks at the beginning and at the end. And then you can also include text here, figures, etc. And the text is going to be simple formatting, like when you put Markdown format, which is, for example, with the hashtags or the pound symbols, that you do your headings, or if you use underscores, 2 underscores, for example, for bold. Oh, I put italics in both. It was supposed to be just 1 asterisk or underscore. Sorry about that. Or italics.
I think it's awesome.
I think it's because I never use italics or italics. I don't know how to say that in English. Never use them ever. So then I'm used to just putting 2 asterisks at the beginning and at the end. So I think that's where my mind went. But anyway, to get started, to open up your new document, all you have to do is go to File, New File, and then select Quarto Document from the menu bar. And it immediately opens up your document that is already populated with a little bit of code and a little bit of text, so that you are not starting with a blank document, so that you can have a little bit of information there. And it will open up on the visual editor. So I'm going to go through that a little bit now. But essentially you have, I feel like for that I should show my R console here. Can you see my R console, or am I just showing?
You're just doing the doc.
The doc, okay. So then let me, okay, I think it's going to be this one. So that would be new file. So File, New File, Quarto Document. So it's going to open up here. You essentially start with HTML. You can just create it without putting anything there, and then you can change it. But essentially, it's going to open up the visual editor here. This is where it starts. I don't know if you can actually change this somewhere else, but for me, it always starts with the visual editor. And this is essentially showing you how the document will look like once you rendered it. But if you go to source, which is the other way that you can have this, then you are going to see this essentially like your code, your markdown format, right? So you can choose whichever you're more comfortable with. I go to source because I've already, like I already know that 2 pound symbols mean the second level heading, right? And then these 2 asterisks put together mean bold. So then if you already know that formatting, then just go to the source. But if you're new, you can just stick to visual, and then it will do it for you, right? So you can do it essentially kind of like a Word document where you essentially put here, for example, this Quarto. I don't want it to be a header 2 level. I want it to be a header 1. It's doing it for you, right? Or a header 6. And then if you go to source, then it already did it for you, right? It formatted it for you. So whichever you're more comfortable with, that's what you do. So then go back here. Okay, so to run code in Quarto, like I said, you need code chunks. So those code chunks are, you can write them by hand, and it's going to be 3 backticks, and then you open up curly brackets, and you insert an R in there, or Python, whatever it is that you're doing, and then you write your code in the following lines, and then you end it with 3 backticks again. Nobody has time to do that, so let's just learn the keyboard shortcut, which would be Command or Control, depending on what your computer you have. So Control Shift Enter, and that's going to give you no, Control Shift I. I don't know why I put Enter here. I think it's Control Shift I, isn't it? Let's type it here. Control Alt I. Why did I put Control Shift Enter? I think that's the one that runs it all. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Apologies for that. I will fix it. So it's Control Alt I. That's the way you insert.
I think
that's because I'm talking about running. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think yeah. Maybe you had it in it anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. So then essentially you insert a code here with Control Shift I, and then if you put anything in it and you want to run it, then that's when you do Control Shift Enter or Command Shift Enter, like so, and then it's going to run it. And then if I do this one, I suppose it will run the entire thing.
You're out, or yeah.
I'm what?
Nothing.
Are you? Yeah.
You're good.
Yeah. Okay. So then, so yeah. So that's. I feel like the shortcuts are always good to know. Then you can choose to have the plot and the output displayed in the document. And for that, you can either choose to have your graphs, any plot maps, anything that you have. You can choose to have them inside your document, or on or any one of these panels, right? If it's a plot, it's going to be here, or if it's going to be a presentation, it's going to go to the presentation tab, or if it's a map, sometimes those go to the viewer pane here on the right. So that depends on what you want. And then you render the whole thing just by clicking either this arrow up top with render, or you can run on the console Quarto render, and then the name of your document. And then that's going to render, produce the HTML file or the PDF file or whatever it is that you have. That's very similar to Markdown or R Markdown so far. That's very similar. So this is what I was talking about with the visual editor, and this is where you already see the text that you have formatted for you. And if you want to see the source of this, or so you don't see necessarily the headers in bold, for example, or the text in italic or bold or underlined, etc., then you go to the source tab. There are many things that the visual editor can do for you. So, for example, when you're embedding figures like this Quarto figure here, like the logo, you can control here the width and the height. So you don't necessarily need to put that in code. So it becomes very fast, or if you don't remember how to do something and you don't have time to like go to the documentation and blah, 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 you can just jump back and forth right between the visual and the source editor. And this is going to essentially write the code for you. It can do a lot of things. And if you forget what things you can do based on all of these little menus in the visual editor, all you have to do is type the backslash. I think that's a backslash or the forward slash. No, that's a backslash. So you just type this, and then it's going to show you all of the things that you can do here. So if you want to insert a code chunk, an R code chunk, or you want to insert a div, which we're going to see in a little bit, or a bullet list or something like that, this is just going to do it for you. So it becomes really, really easy to essentially customize your document. The source editor, like I said, if you already know our markdown, this is just like essentially the same thing. So if you forget anything, you can quickly reference this by going to in RStudio to help, and then markdown quick reference. It's going to open up the markdown reference for you so that you can essentially see everything that I have here, so that you can remember how to put italics or bold text. And if you want to do, for example, bullet lists, or if you want to do tables like this too without using any other package, or insert links or images, all of that, this is already done for you. Okay, so that's the source editor. Then let's talk about code chunks. Like I mentioned before, the keyboard shortcut for a code chunk, which is going to contain all the code that you want to essentially run in here in your console. It's going to be so Command Option I or Control Alt I, depending on if you have Windows or Mac. And then you can, if you forget, because sometimes, I don't know, I never remember it. When someone asks me, what is a shortcut? I can never remember it. But if I'm on my keyboard, my fingers remember, then, you know, so if that happens to you sometimes and you cannot for the life of you remember it, that's when the visual editor comes in handy, because you can just click the insert button and it's going to insert a code chunk for you. So that's super, super interesting. Inside your chunks, remember, everything that is inside a chunk is going to be code. So you have a multiple options that you can include inside your chunks that's going to control how the code is going to look like. Or, for example, if you have a figure, you can control here the size of the figure, the caption of the figure, many, many things. So we're going to start with the first option, which is a label. You can have a label for this specific code chunk. The label has to be individual and it has to be like different for each one. You cannot repeat them. But then essentially you're naming that code chunk. So it's going to be super handy for three things. The first one is that if you go to the bottom of the Quarto document, you can navigate to specific chunks just by using the drop-down navigator in the bottom left of the script editor. And then if you named it with a label that is easy for you to remember, so for example, diamond plot, then you don't have to scroll through the document. All you do is look for that specific chunk, and then you click it here, and it will take you to that part of the document. Graphics produced by these chunks will have useful names that make them easier to use elsewhere, so you can reference back and forth between chunks too. And you can set up networks of cached chunks to avoid reperforming expensive computations on every run. We're going to see a little bit of that, a little more of that in a little bit. So just reiterating these things about chunk labels. The label itself, it has to be short, but evocative in the sense that you don't want to put there like just cars, because what is that, right? Like you want to put there cars summary or bar plot cars or something like that, right? Like something that you can remember, or that it can help you remember what it is. And the book also tells that it recommends using dashes to separate words instead of underscores. Remember to not use any special characters except text and dashes. You can use whatever name you want except setup, because setup is used for a specific reason, which is going to be usually the first chunk in a document that is going to contain all the options that are going to control the rest of the document. So if you put, for example, that in that setup, if you put that figures are going to be 5 inches wide, every figure is going to have that unless you change it in a specific chunk. So then that's the setup chunk that is usually put at the beginning, but I've heard people doing other things with setup too. So I know that's how I use it. Chunk labels cannot be duplicated because that's going to give you an error, and each chunk label must be unique. So then if we go to chunk options, like I was telling you, the first option that we're seeing is label, but there are so many more. This is the full list. If you click this link, and it's going to take you to all the different options that you can set. Essentially, to insert this options, all you do is include the pound or the hashtag symbol, and then the straight bar. I don't know how that is pronounced, or the or, the one we use for or, I think.
Pipe.
The pipe. Okay, there you go.
So it's
Pipe.
Together it is hash pipe, like the Weezer song.
Hash. Okay, I like that. It's hash pipe. Hash pipe. That sounds a little well. Anyway.
Yeah.
Come back. Some of the most used options are the following. So for example, here you would put hash pipe, and then you'd put eval colon space false. So that's important to remember, right? That it's gonna be the false. It's with lower case. It's not with, what do you call the other one? Uppercase.
Uppercase.
It's not uppercase, it's lowercase, yes. So this means, this is essentially saying if you want to evaluate the code that is inside that chunk. So if it's set to true, you are going to run that code. You're telling R to run everything that it's inside. If you don't want it to evaluate it, if you don't want it to be run, then that's when you set eval equals false or eval colon false. So if you're not running that code, that means that those results are not going to be generated. Usually you want to set this for when you are teaching, or you have like a presentation, or you have a document with a tutorial, and you want to show people the code, but not necessarily run it for you in your computer. You just want to include the code. Include false means that it's going to run the code, but it's not going to show it in the final document. Echo false, it says that prevents code, but not the results from appearing in the finished line. So you won't see the code, but you will see the results. This one is super useful, especially when you have like the library for all your packages, so that you don't see in the document all the messages of, yes, we installed it. Like tidyverse usually has 10,000 warnings, or ggplot, or all of those. If you don't want to see all of those messages that, yes, it was installed or something like that, then set message false and warning false, because that way your document won't have it. Results hide, it's going to hide the printed output. So if you have, for example, if you were running, I don't know, a model or something like that, and you put results hide, those results are not going to show in your document, in your final document. The same thing can happen with figures. If you put fig dash show hide, you can have the code, but you're not necessarily going to show the plot. So this is useful if you're writing, like, for example, a test or an exam or something like that, or again, a tutorial, and you want to show how to do this, but you don't necessarily want to show the product, right? Like the end results. Error true is going to cause the render, and I didn't know this one, which is why I included the whole thing. I didn't summarize it because I've never heard of this option. So I thought it was interesting. So when you set the option error to true, it causes the render to continue, even if the code returns an error. So I didn't know this, and this is super cool because it's something that you want to include in the final version of your report, for example, to show the error, etc. But you don't necessarily want it to become an issue with your computer, so that it stops everything, right?
Yeah, yeah. This would definitely be useful throughout book clubs, I think. because there are times when you want to talk about
Yes.
error messages.
You exactly. So that I didn't know. So now I'm gonna make full use of this. The default error false causes rendering to fail if there is a single error in the document. So when you set it to true, you can actually see the error, right? So I think that's pretty cool. There are many more, like I said, you can find them all on this link. So like I said, you can control the size of the figures, you can control, I think even, I don't want to say font size because maybe the size of your font is controlled with the CSS. I'm not sure, but there are 1,000 options over there. The other thing, other than the chunk options, because that's going to be, chunk options are controlled. You have to set them for each one of your chunks. Sometimes you don't necessarily want to do that, right? Because if it's going to be repeating every time you run a chunk and you have 40 chunks there, but not 40, but let's say 10, nobody wants to do that every time. So what you do is you set your global option. And then if one of your chunks, you don't want it to behave like what you set in your global options, you change it just in that code chunk. So let's talk about global options. So the global options, like I was saying, you can set them on the YAML, or you can set them on the first chunk, the setup chunk. I like to set some of them in the YAML because I feel like, I don't know, I feel like everything that I need to control is there, but you can choose whatever you want. So essentially, if you go the YAML route, this is what you do. So there are several of these options for the YAML, and you can find those in the Quarto website. They do a great job with the YAML. All you have to do is search for the YAML tab or the YAML section in the website, and it's going to tell you all the different options that you can have. So for example, what options can you control here? Similarly to the ones that I was mentioning before, under the execute option, then you can set echo false or echo true, and you can set the include false and all of those, warning, false, message false, all of those. And some of them are going to go not on the execute field, but on the neat R or the neater field. For example, some of the chunks, if you want your chunks, for example, to be collapsed and not necessarily be completely displayed, then you go here and you put collapse equals true. Another option that you can set here is if you want your chunks to have that you see, for example, sometimes here, the little copy icon, so that you can just click that and then it immediately will put all your code into the clipboard. So those things can be controlled here too. So I highly recommend you go to the Quarto website and search for the YAML section. Okay, then there is this thing called Inline Code, and I knew about this, to be honest with you, but I had forgotten completely about it, and I'm glad I reread this so that it's present in my mind again. So there is one way to embed our code into a Quarto document directly into the text. The way you do that is that you put R, so you put backtick, R, space, and then the little bit of code that you want, and then you close it with another backtick. So for example, if you want this, the data frame iris has 150 rows. I didn't count them. What I did is I just wrote this, the data frame iris has, and then I did backtick, R, space, and rows, and then I opened iris. So it immediately inserted the 150. I just ended up with rows. But that number, if you want to do, for example, also the min minus the max, if you want to do the range, you can also do that inside the backticks. So that's the inline code that is super handy because, yeah, if you can do that with code, don't write it down. Like, I think that's genius. But anyway, so that's another cool thing about Quarto documents. Figures, I feel like figures, this is gonna be such a, this is a lot. This is a lot. So again, the Quarto documentation, and I feel like I should show here. Let me put it here. So again, the Quarto website has a lot of examples of different ways that you can embed figures into your document to control, for example, figure sizing. If you want to link figures to from a website, if you want to align them, and also if you want, for example, 2 figures, each one with a caption. If you want like different sizes of figures, I don't think we have an example here, but if you want one to be larger than the other one or something like that, all of those things are explained here very, very easy. But just to go over this a little bit fast, so you can have a directory, images or figures, whatever you want to call it, with all of your figures inside, and then you can just include them in your document so that they can be shown there. Essentially, you can do this different ways. You can put them inside a chunk. So you can do this. This is like the Pandoc Markdown style, but you can also put them inside a chunk. You can also use HTML to do all of these things, but you can also do where, yeah, here, like, but that's Python. But essentially, it's the same thing. You can put them inside a chunk, and you can control the figure size, the label, etc., with the options. And then inside, you put the reference to your figure. The other way is that you can have divs, like this little 3 dots right here. These are called divs. And then it's not a code chunk necessarily, but it's just a division that you're going to have inside your document. So essentially, everything that you put inside this, it's going to be, it's like self-containing to this div. So then you can also call your figures here, and you can set this option that it's layout number of columns, 2, 3, 4, however many you want, right? If you have multiples, like multiple figure panels like this one, you can set, for example, that you want 2 rows, 2 columns, 4, whatever you want. And then each one, it's going to be, for example, this one goes to the first section, to this first panel. The second one is going to go to the right. And then the third one is going to go to the second row. So it goes like from like first row, and then it goes to the second row, and so on and so forth. So you can set up as many figures as you want in your document, and that can be controlled either in one div, like I said, or in one chunk. So there are a number of options to control your figure, and this is where things get a little complicated, because you can control the width, the height, the aspect, which is fig aspect, the out width, the out height, because one thing is image is in the document, and the other one is how the document is going to look like once you render it. So image sizing is very challenging because there are so many things that you can control, right? So the book recommends that you pick 2 or 3 so that you don't necessarily go crazy here trying to control everything, and then the things look just completely awful. So it's best if your plots, if all of your plots, as much as it can be done, right? Because sometimes this is not necessarily the best way, but if you can have consistent widths, and to enforce this, so all the widths, all the figures in your document should have the same width. But to enforce this, what you do is you do set fig width to a number, whatever it is that you want. And then you use the fig asp or the figure aspect. In this case, they're showing us the golden ratio, which is 0.618 in the defaults. And then in individual chunks, all you do is then you adjust that figure aspect a little bit more. So then, in a way, everything is more consistent here. So you're controlling the width, but then it's just the aspect that it's going to change a little bit. The other thing that you can do is control the output size with the out width and set it to a percentage of the body width of the output document. So that's important because this output, this out width is not necessarily the width of the figure. What you're putting in here, this 70%, is I want it to occupy or to take 70% of the width of the document, right? So I don't want it to, 100% would be the figure completely using the entire width of the document. If you just want 50%, it's going to be half of that. And then you set the figure to align center or left or right, whatever. And then to put multiple plots in a single row, like I mentioned in the example that I was given before, you just set the layout end call or end row to 2, 3, etc. And that is immediately going to resize your figures to 50% if you have 2 columns and 33% if you have 3, right? So it goes like that. There's a very interesting blog post by Thomas Lynn Pedersen about controlling plot scaling. And I think it's a super useful resource that I highly recommend you read it, because I sort of skimmed through it and it had a lot of things that I didn't know. So even if you are an experienced coder, I highly recommend you go through that. Then we have tables. So tables are a lot too. Tables are a lot, but essentially you can do 2 different types, or you can include 2 different types of tables in a Quarto document. You can either create them directly using Markdown, or you can generate them as a result of a code check. So if you do the first one, the Markdown tables, that is essentially doing them like this, right? But if you do them as a result of a code chunk, what you're doing is you can use, for example, Hux table, Reactable, Cable Extra, which is my favorite, X table, Stargazer, Pander tables, any other type of package, G table, I think it's the other one. So all of these packages are helping you. GT, okay, GT. Yeah. Oh yeah, it's just GT. Yep. Yeah, not G table, it's GT. So GT, super useful. I think I need to start dabbling into that one, because the one I use the most is Cable. Oh, oops, it's Cable Extra. That's my favorite one, but I think GT is very.
Yeah. I've started playing with it and it's pretty straightforward. So yeah, you can do quite a lot with it.
It has a very good documentation. Yeah, the website has a lot of examples, and I like that. Yep. So then essentially you format your table inside your code chunk, and then that's what it's going to be produced in your rendered document. Another thing that I don't think I knew before, so I think it's new information to me, it's about caching. So and it makes so much sense because caching, I mean, other packages do caching too, so I don't know why I hadn't thought about this for the documents too. But anyway, essentially what caching is you let's say you have a document. Inside your document you have a model, or you have a figure, something that it takes forever to run. So you don't want to sit there for 5 minutes every time you render your document, right? You want this to be done in 2 seconds. So what you do is you put cache true in the YAML, so that every time you execute it, what it's going to do is, and you can set them up for individual code chunks too, but it's going to cache those results in your memory so that you don't have to render it every time. So that's super handy. I think it's interesting. Essentially, you can do also the caching, not for the entire document, but for just that problematic code chunk. However, the thing about caching is, and I hope I understood this correctly, but the thing about caching is that must be used with care, because by default, it is based on the code that it's inside that chunk, not its dependencies. So if you want to do a model here, and that model called for data to be used in here, but that when you read that CSV file, for example, that's in another chunk, then you cannot cache that here because it doesn't cache the dependencies. It only caches the code in there. So you can avoid that problem by setting another option in that chunk called depends on. And then what you do is depends on colon, and then you put there inside quotes the thing that you want it to depend on. So the CSV file, the object that you wanted to use in order to run that code, right? To cache that, all of this. So that depends on option should contain a character vector for every one of your code chunks that you want to your cached chunk to depend on, or whatever it is that it depends on. It should be included there. I've never used it, but now that I know about this, yeah, you better believe that I'm going to be trying it out somehow, because this sounds super cool. And as your caching strategies get progressively more complicated, remember that it's good practice to clean all your caches. And for that, all you have to do is run need r : clean cache. You can run that in the console to clean everything so that you actually can produce whatever it is that you really want, right? Other things to remember about Quarto is the YAML header. Like I said, that YAML header, so many things that you can control with. We already went a little bit on that. And the documentation on the Quarto website is really, really good, listing all the options that you want for your YAML. The YAML, like I said, it has all the metadata in your document. And what I'm not sure about, essentially, is what exactly is YAML? Like, I've heard that it's yet another markup language. I've heard all of these things, but the book said that it is YAML, a markup language.
Yeah, it basically doesn't stand for anything anymore. But I think that's the official what it officially doesn't stand for now. Whatever. It's a format that can be used to hold all kinds of data. It's made to be like human readable and human editable, but then also you can use it like it's machine readable if you make it right, and so it's useful for this kind of thing. And technically, it's a superset of JavaScript, so you can put it. I mean, not JavaScript, JSON. So you can put any JSON inside of a YAML, and it works fine. So it's really extendable, and you can do all kinds of stuff.
You mentioned that in one of our previous chapters, I think. Yeah.
Over in my other club.
Oh, it could have been in the WAPR. Yeah, that could be.
Yep.
Anyway. Yes, I remember that, JSON, that he can use JSON there. Yeah. Okay. So then the other thing to remember is that if you are rendering an HTML document, many, many times, it is going to have a lot of external dependencies. For example, images, your CSS style sheets, it's going to have all kinds of things that are essentially these dependencies, right? External dependencies from your document. So when you're trying to share this document with someone else, you don't necessarily want to share the whole thing, right? With all the images and the CSS styles and all of that, because it's too much. You just want to share the HTML. So for that, if in the YAML you put under format, and then under format HTML, and then on the HTML, under HTML, you put embed resources. True. What it's going to do is it's going to produce a self-contained document. Granted, it's going to be a very large document, but you can be sure that if you share it with anyone, it will look exactly like it looks like with your all your external dependencies included, right? Like if you had a style, if you had like the way that you wanted it to look like, all the images, etc., are inside that document. Then the book went to parameters. And I'm going to be honest with you, John, I'm so sorry, because I should have, like, I don't understand parameters. And this has been an issue for me for the longest time. And I should have devoted more time to trying to understand them now this time. But parameters are just that thing that I just cannot wrap my head around it. I think
parameters are where I'm not sure how, I don't remember how well the book goes into it, but parameters are the secret sauce. That's where you can do all kinds of crazy things.
Yeah.
So you can make a report that has variables in it, and then, you know, let's say just for example that it is using the date like they show in the example here, and you could have that parameter available to other pieces of the code. And so each time you knit the report into a website or a PDF or whatever, it will use that parameter and change the aspects of the code. But also the more important thing is then you can run, like, from the command line, when you say to knit it, you can say, okay, yeah, knit this thing, but use these values for the parameter. And so you could, like, you can have a Shiny app where you just type in your name and then it makes the report with your name in it or whatever, things like that. So you can use it to parameterize the report to make other different things happen every time you run it. It can be really useful if you have, well, like I am actively working on totally rebuilding the Tidy Tuesday site using parameterized Quarto for the pages, so we have less typing to do and less variability that we could screw up. So
yeah, I need to explore this more.
Yeah,
because I feel like that's the thing. Like I keep reading and reading, but I need to really like code something and then practice that. I think that's how I will.
Having a use, definitely, you know, you need that before it'll really make sense.
Yeah, because I feel like for the longest time, my advisor tried to tell me like parameters, use parameters in this document, and I'm like, the hell are you talking about? Anyway, yeah, and I've been lazy. I should really devote time to this because I know that it's useful. If
you have like documents that you just make a small change every month, or you know, whatever, on some regular basis, that's where parameters make sense. So because instead of editing the document, you just reknit that document with the new parameter and it fixes it, makes the new version of it. Yeah, it basically turns the whole document into a function, is a way to look at it. And so it's arguments to the function that is the document.
Oh, okay. Okay. Arguments.
Yay.
Yeah, okay. Oh, okay. I think I understand that better now. Okay, I need to practice it anyway. But yeah, that makes sense. It's a function and you are controlling what goes in.
And then it'll put something out that is based on the template that you've set up, but it can have those parameters.
Yeah. So it's like a template. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I think I understand that.
But since you can have code, you can use those parameters in code and you can do all kinds of crazy things with it. So, you know, you give someone's user ID and then it looks up their name and gets their profile picture and gets, you know, whatever, just on that one thing that you sent in. Because it's code, it can do those things.
Oh my God, isn't it amazing? I think, honest to God, I think I should have studied data science as I don't know, maybe another master's degree or something like that, because I really like this, but I love ecology too. But anyway, back to the topic at hand. Sorry about those distractions.
No problem.
My brain just goes into all kinds of sideways and directions. But anyway, let's talk about the final topic so that we can end this on time. So bibliographies and citations. So essentially, when you're doing a document many times, you want to include a citation and your references at the end. So how do you do that in Quarto? Super easy. So there are two ways. You can either use the visual editor, and I had no idea that this existed. I am like in love with this. So let me show you, because it's easier if I show you. So let's say this is your Quarto document. You want to include here a citation. So all you do is go to your visual editor here on the tab, and then let's put it here. You put insert, and then you go here to citation, or you do Control-Shift-F8. And then it goes to your Zotero library, or if you have a .bib file, it's going to go there too. You can use also Crossref, PubMed. If you have a DOI, hope you don't have a DOI. If you have a DOI, then you just insert that link in here. It's going to search it, and then it's going to populate that into your document. So let's say we want to include this one, which is from my Zotero library. And voila, you have your citation here that when you render your document, it's going to include, obviously, the necessary citation. And at the end, you will have your references if that's exactly what you want to do too. But look at this immediately what happened. It inserted bibliography for you because this wasn't there at the beginning.
Right.
This thing created the references.bib document for you. Can you imagine this thing? I mean, honest to God, Quarto is the future. So references.bib, you can create that for you. If you have it, go ahead and do it. But if you don't, you have 5 minutes and you need to do this like in 5 minutes. Just do this. Super easy. And then if I render this, I suppose, yes, whatever, I will delete it later. Oh, test. I hope it will render it without problems. Yes. So here is the citation. And at the end, you have your references. Isn't this beautiful? It is. Don't tell me that it isn't, because it is. So anyway, so you can have that. But if you already know how to do citations, you already know how to create .bib files, etc., all you have to do is include exactly this. Let's go to the source file. In the YAML section, you put bibliography, and then you include the document that has all your references. And to include your citations, you put them inside square brackets, and then you just put the way that it's so that's going to be in your .bib file, so the way that it's labeled, that's what you include in here. And then you can also control here, I don't remember exactly how, but you can control if this is going to follow the APA style, or if it's going to follow whatever journal it is that you have, whatever style it is. You can put that also here. I don't remember exactly those options, but that can also be done. And obviously you can include a lot of them just by, if you have like 2 or 3 references, all you have to do is separate them with a colon, semicolon. No, that's a colon. No, that's a semicolon. With semicolons, and then you're good to go. Isn't that super easy? And that's it. That's it
Yay.
for today. Yay! I am 3 minutes after the hour.
Yeah,
I try to summarize. Try to summarize as much as possible, John. So that's it.
Awesome. And biblio style is the option for setting the different citation styles. Which again, it's in the docs, so they're very good docs. Sometimes it takes a little searching to find like where they talk about something, but it's there. It'll always, it's there somewhere. All right. Awesome. So next week
I have 2 questions for you.
Oh, yep.
Yeah, end it, and then